Welcome back to Jeff Willett's Muscle Hub, home of my weekly Q&A show and all of my YouTube video updates. Thanks for your question submissions this week. Keep them coming in because you guys drive the show. Now let's jump into this week's questions. Question number 1 comes from Christian Boyle, and this came through email. What's your take on forced reps, drop sets, and supersets? Well, no, no, and no. I don't think any of these are the most effective ways to really go about creating maximum muscle growth with your weight training workout. Forced reps, we don't really like to do those. We like to stop at the point of what we call positive failure, which means you're in that 4 to 6 rep range and you're stopping at the last rep that you can complete on your own, or at most you want just a little touch from your partner. Otherwise, if you're going into forced reps, what actually is happening is your partner's taking load off of that bar, so you're doing an extra 2 or 3 reps with actually less load on the bar, so we don't want to get into that part of it. As far as drop sets and supersets, both of these encourage muscle fatigue. And in the Max OT principles and to really maximize muscle growth, we want to avoid muscle fatigue and we want to train to the point of muscle overload. So we'd rather stop and overload the muscle in that 4 to 6 reps rather than going on and on with drop sets or supersets. Question 2 comes from Grant, and this came through Facebook. Can you tell me what overload means? I think a lot of times we just kind of assume that we know these terms that we use all the time, so I thought it was good if we maybe defined it a little more clearly. When we're talking about overload, we're talking about the level of resistance we're putting on a muscle, and the way that we define that or determine it is by the given rep range we're shooting for. So in this case with the Max OT principles, we're looking at 4 to 6 reps. So we want as much weight as you can get, at least 4 reps on your own and no more than 6. And the reps will never lie. So as long as you're achieving that rep range, you know that you have the appropriate amount of overload or the appropriate amount of resistance on the muscle to get your maximum results. Question 3 comes from KH from Toronto, and this was sent to me through email. And he asked, what if someone wanted to be totally greedy over the course of however many years it took as a drug-free lifter to build a balanced and ripped physique much like you had in 2003 while attaining some really big powerlifting numbers on like squats and deadlifts? So how, if at all, would you change the Max OT protocol as a drug-free powerlifter to accomplish all these things? That's a big question, and I think, you know, you want to have, regardless of what your goal is, what your physique goal is or a powerlifting goal, I think to maximize your potential, you want to have a clearly defined goal. And I think trying to achieve everything at once means you might not do any of them fully to their best. As far as the physique part of it, we know the drug-free methodology that we like to use to maximize those results. And as you're training with overload and progressive overload and all those Max OT principles and the smart nutrition and supplementation, you are also going to be getting stronger at the same time. There is definitely some overlap to that. But as far as then taking it to a powerlifting area where you're really judged and trying to get that one lift maximum, I wouldn't begin to profess that I know the nuances of training for that exactly. I mean, again, there is some overlap because you know, a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, and the more cross-sectional area to muscle fiber, the more force it can exert. But still, then when you start talking about the powerlifting side of it, again, that's not an area that I'm really expert enough on to evaluate or prescribe. But I will say that when you do the Max OT principles as I did for many, many years, you will find that your strength is increasing. But I really wasn't ever the strongest guy, but I did, again, strength was proportionate and increasing over time. But my goal really wasn't, you know, X amount of pounds on the squat as much as it was training with that overload like we talked about, and then always trying to progress my numbers over time. So I guess in a roundabout way, I would say you're better off to have a clearly defined goal and then really structure your plan to achieve that rather than try to kind of get everything. I think that's less effective. Question 4 comes from Imran, and this came through Facebook. It says, I've read a lot of studies showing that isometric training is good for building strength and muscle and also endurance. My question is, should I incorporate isometric training such as chest holds in my workouts? Well, isometric training is when we talk about tension on a muscle without changing the length of a muscle. So like a chest squeeze or flexing or posing is essentially an isometric movement. Isotonic movements are what's customary with traditional weightlifting, where the muscle is shortening and lengthening with load on it. I really think it's best, again, in my opinion, from long-term muscle building gains, I'd rather not involve isometrics along with the Max OT style training, because I want to place the muscle under the most load that I can through those basic compound lifts, but in between I don't want to do anything else that would potentially fatigue the muscle. So I would not do that. I would stick just with the basic Max OT principles and then follow those workouts, of course, with the great nutrition. Question 5 is from DJ, and this came through YouTube. And he asked, and I want to look like that guy. Stuart used a product called Creatine HSC from AST Sports Science. Since they don't have that product anymore, what do you suggest for the post-workout drink? Well, you're right. They don't. ASC Sports Science doesn't have creatine HSC anymore, but fear not, because you can still build this pretty much the same drink with some great products that they do have. They have micronized creatine 1000 and DGC crystals. I guess the camera does add 10 pounds, but in any event, the micronized creatine 1000 is going to give you your micronized creatine, the same that was in creatine HSC. And the DGC is going to be dextroratory glucose crystals to give you your high glycemic carbohydrate, again, much like that old formula. So you can mix those two together in your drink. And then I would also add GL3 L-glutamine and VP2 whey isolate, and then you have the perfect pre and post workout drink. Now let me clear these out of here for a second. Oh, sorry. This one. That's going to leave a mark. Well, anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Keep your questions coming. You guys drive the show. You can send your questions through Facebook, through Twitter, through YouTube. You can hashtag them AskJW. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Now let's go out and execute.